Well, here I am checking and going to adjust the rear brakes on Mrs. Colurado's rig. I use the tool that I bought off of Amazon.com, brake drum measuring tool, and I measured the inside of her hub, and the narrowest spot was 203 millimeters, very close to what it was on my hub. One thing I failed to mention in my first video is that when you get ready to check and adjust your brakes, you want to make sure that this fine adjustment, the one that you can adjust with everything back together, which adjusts the height of this cam, you want to make sure that this is in a neutral position to where the cam is flat when you start, and that this arm is past the 90-degree point. So that way when you put your foot on the brake, you get the most travel and the most adjustment. So I'm starting with that. I've got the nut back out all the way to the end of the rod. It's past the 90-degree, and that's my neutral position that I'm starting at with her brake pads. Now I measured her brake pads. The bottom one right now is sitting at 110.5, which means if you follow my first video, the axle is 20 millimeters, so if we want to measure from center line to the end of the pad, we got to deduct 10 millimeters. So I'm sitting at 100.6. Well, if her drum is 203, that isn't going to make it. The halfway point would be 101.5. Half of 203 is 101. So I have to adjust this bottom pad out at least a millimeter. So I'm going to remember that number. I'm going to turn my caliper over and put it on this brake pad. In the same exact spot, in the same exact position I did the last one. And I come up with 111 even. So this has to go out about half a millimeter as well. So this about 1 millimeter, this about half a millimeter, and it might not seem like a lot when you're dealing with the brakes, but it is. It's a huge deal. And so we could see that when this brake was being applied, that this pad would hit and this one wouldn't. And we want them both to hit at the same time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, well, I have to get the axle out of my way. I'm going to remove the brake pads. I will lay them down, and I'm going to adjust this screw out and this screw out. This brake pad 1 millimeter, this brake pad about half a millimeter. Another thing that's a very common misconception with these brake pads is that these shoes are going to end up being the same amount out from the, no. As you can clearly see, that this one's out a lot further than this one, and it's going to stay that way. Again, don't fall into that trap of, well, if I adjust these out the same amount, my brake pads are the same distance from center line. That's not the case. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust these off video, and then we'll get back when I have them back on the bike. So I'm back at after adjusting the brake shoes, and I turned each one of them out basically one flat. And so I measured them with my digital caliper, and on the top side I have 111.2 millimeters, and on the bottom side I have 111.3 millimeters. So I thought that was pretty close because that adjustment on the brake shoe is kind of a rough adjustment. I think it moves it out about 1 millimeter each time. So I took the Harbor Freight tool, or I'm sorry, the tool I bought on Amazon, and I measured the brake pads like that, and I come off, and it is a shade over 202, which is pretty close. Again, the inside of the hub was 203. So because I have this in a neutral position and backed all the way out to the end of the screw, if I want, I can make a fine adjustment like this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the wheel back on, and I'm going to take it for a ride and see how it grabs. If I need to make a fine adjustment, I'm going to make it here. If not, I'll just leave it the way it is. But the important thing is when I'm done, this brake pad and this brake pad are almost exactly the same distance away from center of the hub, and then that way when I apply my brake, they both go out at the same time, they both contact the hub at the same time, giving you the most braking power on the rear of the bike. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to PM me or email me, and we can talk about this process.